Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. Just let a couple more folks populate the room.
I'm just adding my welcome as people join. We're waiting for people to get situated. Get comfortable. This is going to be fun.
Get a cup of coffee. I got mine. Oh, Nina's got hers.
I wonder at 4 o'clock Eastern time, are people still having coffee? I don't know, Jill, are you still having coffee in Chicago?
Oh no, I don't have coffee past about 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Oh.
Yeah, it's a hard stop for me.
All right. I think we'll just give it one more minute and then we can get started. Can folks put in the chat? Or I guess the chat's off, but I was going to say, where is everyone but located?
Yeah, no chat today. But we do have the Q&A for people to put in their questions. And there'll be lots of time for those. Okay. It's a 1:02. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Deutschman, and I'm the Executive Director of the UC National Center for Free Speech and Civic Engagement. And hopefully you're here to learn about our Fellows Program. And before I get started talking a little bit more about the center, I'd love for everybody to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with one of our key center team members, Brenda.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brenda Pitcher. I'm the executive assistant at the center. I am here for all things logistical. I'll handle finance, travel, onboarding, policy questions. Basically, anytime you're not sure what to do, I'm the one that you call. And let's pass it over to Melanie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melanie Zman. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Communications and Program Associate at the center. I'm really excited to be here. Just managing some questions in the Q&A and keeping the Zoom running smoothly. So happy to be here.
And we are so lucky to have two of our incredible former fellows joining us today. And so Jill and then Nina, why don't you just kind of say a quick intro and then we'll officially get started.
Absolutely. I'm Jill Dunlap. In my full-time role, I'm the Assistant Vice President for Policy Research and Civic Engagement at NASPA, which is a student affairs organization. And I will pass it over to
Hi, I'm Nina Flores. I was a fellow in Jill's year as well, and then also the senior fellow for 2023-24. My other job is I'm an associate professor at Long Beach State.
Okay. So here's what we're thinking, or what we're thinking we're going to do, which is I'm going to just give kind of an overview about the center and the fellowship program. And then I'm going to turn it over to Nina and Jill to each talk a little bit about their experiences. And that should take about half the time. And then we will answer questions. We have some questions that already came in, and you can put them into the Q&A as we go through it. The first people are asking about recordings. We are going to record the first half of this for the kind of presentation piece. And then for the Q&A, we will not record. So everybody feels comfortable to talk candidly. So let's officially kick it off. So let's see. Who am I? Well, I'm a lawyer by training, but as I always say, I'm the good kind of lawyer. I like to think that I am. I haven't practiced traditional law in my career. All of my work has really been about applying legal principles and ideas to education, which is one of the key things that we do at the center. The center was sort of birthed in 2017, if people can remember back to the kind of Charles Murray, Milo Yiannopoulos days, when, President Trump in Trump 1.0 was talking about cutting federal funding to higher education if schools, especially public universities, weren't allegedly allowing free speech. And so then UC President Janet Napolitano created the center to explore the intersection of expression, engagement, and democratic learning, and consider what can be done to restore trust in the value of free speech on college campuses and within society at large. I would say that's a pretty heavy lift right now, which I think, again, speaks to the importance of the work that we're doing. We fulfill our mission a number of ways, including through our webinars, through our Speech Matters podcast, which you should totally subscribe to, our annual conference, which you should register for, and of course, our year-long fellowship program that is open to academics, policymakers, practitioners, kind of come from any background or discipline. I think that's one of the things that makes the fellows program unique. We welcome candidates from all backgrounds. We want a wide range of innovative projects. Of course, as part of the University of California, we're committed to promoting all kinds of diversity and equal opportunity in education, as well as in research and creative activity. One of the things that makes this center unique is that we're focused on projects that address current issues affecting students, staff, administrators, faculty, and other stakeholders in higher education. And the projects we hope will have a direct impact on individuals and communities across campuses. And work products can take a lot of different forms, such as, but of course, this is not an exhaustive list, qualitative or quantitative research, curricular modules, toolkits, training programs, pilots. Just to give you a sense, we've had almost 70 fellows across our 7 classes, 36 faculty members, 7 student affairs administrators, 12 graduate students, 1 undergraduate student, and 12 folks who are either from a nonprofit or an advocacy organization. We have a high school librarian. So even though we have skewed sort of, almost half or a little more than half academics, everybody is absolutely welcome to apply. And I think the whole idea is to have a cohort of people that can learn from each other, especially because they're not all doing the same thing. Quick background, this is not a residential fellowship. We have the center awards each fellow that's selected $20,000. That $20,000 is awarded to the fellow for their contribution to the center and can be spent at the discretion of the fellow. So some people have used the money to buy out a course, other things that you can do. The $5,000 in research funds, unlike the $20,000, the $5,000 is by reimbursement only. And of course, like all things you see, there are some rules. The reimbursement, the research, people use it for things like transcripts, incentives for interviews, research assistants, and travel to conduct research. Fellows meet monthly on Zoom to do project updates and really to talk about the world, especially right now, as well as on a one-on-one basis with senior fellows and/or center staff. I do want people to know that if you are selected as a fellow, then there is another opportunity to become a senior fellow, which is something we started a few years ago, and Nina can speak to that. 1 year is a short amount of time and it goes fast. And we know that even though someone might finish a project in 1 year, that isn't enough time to necessarily implement it. And so we support fellows, again, financially, if they become a senior fellow. We also, in the last couple of years, have been able to give all fellows in the year following their fellowship $1,500 that they can use towards travel to go to conferences to share the work that they completed during their fellowship year. and, to continue to push out people's work. If you were to check out our news page, for instance, we're constantly trying to elevate the work of our fellows, not just work, that's more related to the fellowship, but also op-eds and so forth. I think another really key piece of being a fellow is being part of a community, not just of fellows, but of folks in the UC and nationally who kind of share the purpose of democratic learning and engagement. And one of the things I want to mention is sort of the collaborative nature, both of the cohort and across cohorts. So for instance, at the AAC&U annual conference, which was just a couple weeks ago in DC, I moderated a panel that had 4 former fellows, including Jill, on it. At ASH, we did a similar panel with 4 different fellows on the threats to academic freedom that I also moderated. We've had fellows who've worked on chapters of each other's, edited volumes. We just had 2 fellows who published a law review piece together. So there's both opportunities sort of within that 1 year and then beyond. I think the other thing I just want to note is every year we sort of have some suggested topics. This year we really sort of tailored that list and sort of are putting more emphasis on those particular issues that we think are particularly of note in this current moment. And you can find those in the application. Of course, you're welcome to apply with an additional theme or topic, but sort of letting people know up front where we want to sort of place our energy. In terms of the application, it's pretty straightforward, and we just ask a couple things. So curriculum vitae or resume, not to exceed 2 pages. So you can imagine why we might have put that in place as we started receiving 25-page CVs. So 2 pages, and our rules are fairly strict. If you go beyond word limits or page limits, the application will be disqualified. The kind of second piece is a statement that's 1,250 words that does not include citations or references. People always ask, describing your proposed project. How is it going to further the national conversation related to expression and democratic participation on college campuses? We want people to really elucidate what's the need for your project, what are the objectives and potential impact. Then we have another separate question that talks about what qualifies you to complete your project in particular, okay, including access that you have to the resources or tools or populations that you will need to use or have access to during the year. And then another question is shorter, but how this fellowship will enable you to complete your project. So sort of being able to explain why this year-long experience and funding is connected to your being able to do the work, right? As opposed to sometimes applications come in and it's not clear whether it seems like they would be able to do the work, whether or not they're part of the fellowship. So being able to really explain that. And then a timeline for project development and completion. 1 year is 1 year. And so one of the things is like, we want people to be realistic about what can be accomplished in a year. We don't want people to overpromise. And so I think we recently added in this timeline component so that the applicant can help to make sure, help us understand how it's going to get done. So that was a lot of me talking. And so what I'm thinking I'm going to do is take a break from talking and turn it over to Nina and Jill. And let's start by having each of you talk a little bit about, if you can remember way back, what your project was, thinking about how you put together your application, sort of what some of your findings were. And we'll go from there.
Okay. All right. Well, so I'm Michelle, I think probably gets tired of me like telling this joke, but it is literally how my project started that I was one of the people that applied as part of a team. And so my research partner and I, at the time before we were research partners, went to the nearest watering hole in Chicago on a dark, snowy night and having an argument. I come from a student affairs background. She comes from law enforcement, and having this sort of like debate about why, when there were campus protests, that law enforcement are frequently called when there's a policy violation as opposed to a violation of the law. So that led to us, talking about like, well, we could like really dig in on that and figure out like, do law enforcement need to know or be better trained, or do students need to be better trained? And so I had the fortune of meeting a lot of the different fellows from, I think, maybe the first cohort at one of at a conference I was at and that Michelle was at, and sort of put those two like events together and said like, I think we could actually make a project out of this. And so I always am a big fangirl of the center. I think Nina is as well. But for me, I was really intimidated about the process of applying because I'm not a traditional academic. My research partner was not a traditional academic, but we both had I have a PhD in political science and she has a PhD in psychology. And so we thought like, well, this is maybe a long shot, but let's go ahead and apply. And I had been encouraged by some of the previous fellows to go ahead and submit an application. And so I did. And I think part of the real beauty of it was that we were able to meet amazing people. Like I would never have come into contact with Nina otherwise. And so we got to meet really rad people and become a part of a community, like Michelle said. But I also think for us, it was sort of the evolution of our project that we came in with this idea of like, oh, it's, law enforcement need better training or students don't understand the policy. And we really came up with this very third finding, which is that student affairs administrators were the ones engaging law enforcement when there's campus protest. And so that turned into sort of this evolution of thought about the problem that we were researching and then what some of the solutions were. And our ultimate project, which you can find on the center website along with all the other fellows projects, really centered on the idea that campus administrators need to do a better job of training students about what their policies are and what the limits of those policies are, and when they move from a policy violation into a law violation, but then also training campus administrators about what that distinction is and when law enforcement should be engaged. And so this was happening around the time of the George Floyd protests. And so it was very timely. I think it continues to be very timely as a topic. But it was just a really wonderful experience for both of us because we felt really supported by the center staff and also by the other fellows members. So we were the COVID year, so we didn't get to meet in person until the following year when travel restrictions were lifted. But by that time, when we all got together in person, it was like coming like together with family that you had known for a year online. And so I also just think it's such an opportunity to continue to have prolonged engagement. There's a book club that Melanie helps put together. And so I get to see these faces in an ongoing way and presenting at conferences, and even going to conferences where I'm not presenting on my project, running into other fellows has just been such a fun thing for me. And I just have not enough nice things to say about my fellowship year and the way that it afforded us to really dig in on this project. So that's what I would say, Michelle. I hope that's good enough.
Yeah, we pay them later. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, Jill. I see a few questions and before Nina, you go, if it's okay. I want to make sure people know a couple things. Yes, you may apply at, like Jill was talking about, as a pair. I just want to make sure it's clear though, that money is then split. So the pair you split, you still get the same pot of research money and then you split the $20,000. So it's not more. A few people are asking if you have to be affiliated specifically with the university or a nonprofit. You do not. Another person asked about staff. Absolutely, staff administrators are welcome to apply. And then one more question, which I should have mentioned, and Nina can speak to this as a former senior fellow. One person asked about whether you get support when you're thinking about getting participation and designing a survey. And yes, I think that is one of the reasons we have the senior fellow and this whole network of fellows and the cohort. So that's a lot of what we talk about in our monthly meetings, which is like, what is a good participation rate? What are appropriate incentives? And so forth. So yes, there is support. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nina.
Hi. So yeah, Jill and I, we started during the COVID year, which means that the project that I designed was happening in the winter before we went on lockdown. And then I submitted this application and I forgot about the application. And then in April, after we'd been home for some time, I got this email from the center and it was like, welcome to being a fellow. And I think all of us had to really just go back and like, oh gosh, like what have I pitched to this center? And is it even going to be, viable for the next academic year? So we had some challenges that year, mostly related to IRB, and especially if you had started in on a project maybe and having to revamp what your institutional review board was going to look like. All of a sudden, we all knew how to use Zoom. Like, I don't know about you, but I did not know how to use Zoom before the COVID years and trying to get everything done there. So I feel like my intro to the center was just an absolutely amazing online community because we all just saw each other in Zoom boxes for the first probably 16 months, 12 months of the fellowship, and then 4 months after until we were finally able to meet in person. And then, as Jill said, once we did meet, it's like you've known people for a really long time because you're having actual meaningful connection and engagement in the meetings that are for fellows. And so I feel like that's a key part of this. Sorry, I'm starting with the back end questions, Michelle, and then moving to the project. But
You,
that's a key part to me of this is
you do you, Nina.
there's so many meetings I'm sure that we all go to where you're like, that could have been an email, and that's not these emails, right? Or that's not these meetings. These are, you want to see these people, you want to talk about your project, you want to share any challenges that you're having so you can get like brainstorm feedback on what's going on. You want a place to debrief about whatever the moment is that you might be in. You want a place to think forward. I think sometimes there's not enough time and space in academic world especially to think really do future thinking, and this is one of those times to think about how your project can evolve over time. So my project is about the targeted harassment of faculty by members of the public. And so it was already a pretty heavy thing. My past research is about street harassment, sexual harassment, and I'd moved into the faculty sphere because I saw it happening, and then also I had been someone who'd been harassed for things that I was writing online. And so when I pitched this project, it was an interview-based project where I was going to interview people who had experienced periods of targeted harassment and then develop a series of workshops in order to better support them at a campus level. The interviews were, and still are, it's an ongoing project. Please feel free to reach out if you have ever been targeted for harassment, and I'm happy to talk with you. But these interviews were really heavy, and so part of navigating this project was about navigating that, right? And engaging with these participants in a way that was going to be beneficial. And so the workshops that came out of that are a series of how to develop better policy, how to talk about the issue, how to understand what targeted harassment is. And targeted harassment could be anything from an onslaught of hundreds, thousands, tweets, messages, emails to death threats and rape threats, right? And people that I've interviewed, in a third of the cases by now, and this is not just the fellowship year, but beyond, have had FBI involvement in their cases because the harassment has been that bad. And so I think about like this as a pressing and urgent issue facing higher education, and that's how I approached my application. So this is not a unique issue in that it's not new, right? It's been happening for, I'd say 2017, 2016 is the first years that we were really naming it and really like bringing it to the forefront. But this was timely and urgent, and I really put that at the forefront of the application because if the issue isn't urgent, then why should it be a fellowship application was my logic. I'd heard about the fellowship from a colleague, and I had thought about applying the year before, but I knew that my project just wasn't quite there yet. And so I waited and I really let things evolve. I started writing more about it, I was presenting more about it. And by the time that I applied, I knew I had something there. You know, when you know that feeling, like you know when your project's ready to go. And so I feel like the detail that I was able to put into that application, the exact, I think I even provided a timeline, even though I don't think it was required the year that we applied, but the timeline that I had outlined, I knew it could get done in the year. And I think that that's a key thing for the fellowship is knowing that you have the time and capacity to get this done. Because it's such a gift of time, right? It's such a gift to be part of this center. And if you can't use it, just like it's, I mean, you deserve to have a project that's ready to go and to give yourself the time to actually implement that project. So by the time I applied for a senior fellowship, a couple of years later, I was putting these workshops into practice, whether through campus visits, so I can come to your campus and we can do workshops, or online, even Zoom workshops, things like that. And I developed some more materials to go along with that. But half of the senior fellows position has to do with supporting the current class of fellows. And so a lot of what I was doing there was helping them develop their projects or shape them or evolve them, working with them on developing their survey questions, thinking about like, okay, if you're using an interview protocol, what does this look like? For those that were having trouble with IRB, really thinking about like how we could smooth that process for them and make sure that they were presenting the strongest application possible for their own IRB. And sometimes it's just getting through your own head if you feel like you're stalling, right? And you just sometimes even a 15-minute conversation with someone just helps to break that up. And so part of that senior fellow's role is to just be available to do that and to provide the support that someone might need. Um, the community is invaluable. So like I just can't stress that enough. This is a very special, unique space. It does not feel like any competitive academic space I've ever been in before. It's collaborative. Everyone wants to collaborate. There's definitely not a tear down culture here. There is not anything like that. And I think that is that's the culture that Michelle and the whole team set at the center. And it's a very welcomed and just heartwarming space, I think, for anyone who's been involved.
Thank you, Nina. Thanks, both of you. Let's see. I want to go ahead. There's a couple questions that I think we can work together on answering. The first says, can you use the $20,000 for data collection, such as incentives? And relatedly, will the award be routed through the university, employer, or managed directly between the fellow and the center? So what I would say is the $5,000 in Research Fund is usually what people apply to use for like incentives and so forth. Okay. So if your research, if you have an assistant and you have transcripts and you have lots and lots of incentives and you like decide to make, 3 trips or 5 trips and you go above $5,000, then you will need to go into some other pot of money, whether that's the $20,000 or something else. But that $20,000 is really sort of to compensate you for the time. And then about different fellows do different things. Some fellows, the majority of fellows, it's just between the fellow and the center, and there's an onboarding process and so forth. And obviously, like taxes apply, and there's the details. But some people do want it to go through their university for different reasons, including through a course buyout, or they want it, so it can be part of their, application for tenure or promotion, things like that. I think that was that question. Do either of you have anything to add on that? Probably. Okay. Let's talk about IRB, which is like one of my least favorite topics, in large part because I have had to do a very steep learning curve, given that I'm a JD, not a PhD. So it says for individuals not tied to a university, for example, a foundation, will IRB be required for those doing research? So the requirement of IRB doesn't have to do with where you work or what you're tied to. It has to do with the type of research you're doing. And I'm going to let Nina and Jill talk a little bit about the kinds of things that require IRB. If you are not tied to a university, then UC Irvine, which is where Melanie, Brenda, and I are based, can help you go through an IRB process, which I believe is what Jill did. So why don't I let you both speak to that? Let me see if there's, okay, sorry. It says, are IRB approved studies the primary type of work that's funded by this fellowship? And I wouldn't say no, it's not the primary type. I mean, I think a lot of people do want to engage with human subjects, and therefore IRB is necessary. But I wouldn't necessarily say that is like a primary focus. It's one vehicle through which people can learn. All right, now I really will let the two of you talk about IRB.
I can just say it was something that I wish I had known was going to take a little bit more time because, again, my research partner and I at the time, neither one were at a university. So I was at an association and she was in law enforcement. And so it did take us a little bit more time. Like we both had been the CITI certified, but we had to redo it because our CIT expired because we were a little bit outside of the time when we had originally done that. But I will also say that we didn't feel pressured by the center in any way. The center is going to publish your research whether you have the IRB or not. I think the reason reason that we chose to do it as researchers is that we wanted to leave ourselves open the possibility of publishing, and that a lot of places require that. And so we went through that process through UC Irvine and Michelle's help. I will just say that if you are not affiliated and you intend to do that, to like build that into your timeline, because it does take a little bit of time to get either the training to do CITI to be eligible for IRB, but then also to fill out all the paperwork. So
I mean, I would say if you're doing human subjects research, you're going to have to do IRB. But some people aren't doing human subjects research, right? So then you don't have to do it, and that's up to you and how you're framing your project. For instance, if you're looking at an existing data set and you're doing quantitative research, you're not going to have to go through the IRB process. But if you're interviewing people, you're going to have to do it because you're affiliated with UCI at this point, or I mean, you're affiliated with wherever you're affiliated with, but you're part of the center. I think some people who are just doing toolkit stuff that's not based on an interview research project or something like that, they may be able to just, have a different kind of project.
I just wanted to let people know that we're going to stop the recording at this point. We're doing that as we kind of go into more of the Q&A.